I actually start talking, so we're just it's like we've already been broadcasting live for 2-3 hours, Adrian Serrano. So we come in mid live broadcast. Yeah, sure. If you thought that any Sox Populi live event would start on time, again, you'd be wrong. So far, you really got to take the under on that, because we've yet to really pull any of these off on time. So we've been waiting. So sorry for that, but really, you should know better by now. Come on. This isn't exactly an ass cast, but I mean, we're
getting there.
We're doing this for fun. We're doing this for fun. Our podcast, Adrian, as you know, as a veteran of dozens of these already, really the laughs, the dark humor, that really, has to prevail. We could probably be World Series winners, and we would still lead with that. But we are far, Adrian, from World Series winners. So the black humor is just going to continue here on our live event. Welcome to any of you watching out there in Twitterland, Facebook dumb, or even on Southside Sox proper, or the YouTube. We're here. We'll take questions. We'll listen to you. We'll hang out. We're going to talk. Ostensibly, we're talking draft as a draft review of how the White Sox did, what we feel about some of those picks, maybe a favorite pick, a trend, good or bad. And, I think invariably we will have to, as we are broadcasting live, good time and good choice on the host part to go during a White Sox baseball game, but maybe not a bad idea given how the White Sox baseball game is going. Probably do want to turn the channel to something else. Hey, hello, we're here. Thanks for flipping to us. No, don't flip right through. This is better than an infomercial. We usually. And so we probably will talk a little bit about the White Sox. If I manage to remember to work in a break in a live event, then maybe in the second half of this thing, we'll just talk about the state of what this team is. And maybe not all of it will just be the same rerun and rending of garments and tearing of hair that it's been, pretty much since we've been doing these. I believe this is technically 154. This is definitely the third live event. Adrian Serrano, it is your very first. Thank you so much for booking home, setting up the studio, getting BB in place, because really BB is our third performer here live so far. We'll see who else may join us from the Southside Sox crew. Willow, who knows, Willow O'Keefe, but just decide to.
He might make a screen appearance at some point.
We'll see. He usually does.
He walked away for now, but I have some breaking news. Unfortunately, Touki Toussaint has given up an earned run.
Okay, all right. So the whole what would it have been, like an 8+ inning,
almost complete game shutout, is out of the question.
Hey Touki, you're okay just getting picked up off the scrap heap and going like 4 or 5 innings every couple of days, right, Touki? You all right with that? Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
how many for your life?
How many years has a scrap heap guy or an afterthought been pivotal to any chance of success? It's like the 5 WAR Rodon season was hey, let's just toss a $3.5 million at him and hope for the best. Touki this year. Last
Cueto,
year,
obviously.
Last year with Cueto, obviously. Yeah, it's just with all the pitching infrastructure that they're supposed to have and keep coming. Michael Kopech's your number 2 starter in 2024.
May as well give him a rest for the.
He might be the number 1 if Cease gets traded. I mean, I don't think they're going to trade Cease, but there's the Dodgers. Clayton Kershaw today said it's going to be a couple weeks until he can really get going again. So the Dodgers need pitching. The Reds, if they actually think they can win this year, they need pitching. There's a lot of teams that need pitching. So Dylan Cease, they might get an offer that they can't say no to. So it's not looking great for their pipeline of talent, especially on the pitching side.
Yeah, that pipeline. Here's the thing. We can't even look at it like a number of things went wrong to derail this plan. Certainly you flip a Dane Dunning, I suppose, for Lance Lynn because you're in win now mode. We can't really go back and relitigate that. Although, all right, toss-up decision, you're in go for it mode, fine. There wasn't a whole lot more than the Dunnings of the world to trade in the first place. So you can't say this injury or this trade or this guy decided to retire or go play in Korea
Yeah.
threw off a plan that the White Sox had. Sure, there have been injuries. Every team has injuries. So, the pipeline, it's a very generous word you're using, Adrian, but I'm sure, they wish they had one.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever built it, unfortunately.
Yeah, because you could try to relitigate the Dunning thing, but Dunning at his best is going to be a mid-rotation guy, where Lance at his best was, a number 2. So like you got better, out of that, but like maybe you made that move for Lance a half year too late, for it to really matter to this team. And yeah, there's a couple of exciting guys maybe down there right this second, but like nobody that's even 3 years away, like we're looking maybe 2027 for Noah Schultz. I don't,
Yeah.
unless something goes really well. So as you're starting to like break this iteration of the team down, it's going to be interesting to see what they target as far as position player versus pitchers coming back, because you kind of have to do both because you really don't have either. Like you've rebuilt, and then in that time, except for maybe within, and the jury's still out, but last year was a decent draft. Most people would say. I would say this year also, I think probably okay. For the White Sox, this year was a good draft. Historically, they many more question marks along the line. At least this looks like a normal major league draft with a mixture of position players and pitchers, and a mixture of like older guys that maybe you could sign cheaper, and some younger guys that might do something. The locals are really excited about the local kid. Still, the fact that he's going to sign, that's a 17-year-old. So it's a nice young guy to put in the system and see what you can get out of it. But maybe a little too late, for Rick and the boys.
The White Sox, Rick and the boys finally got through Moneyball. It took them 20 years. They finally finished the book, and they said, hey, you know what? We're going to draft some guys who can hit for contact, who might not be afraid to take a walk. They signed one guy in Yasmani Grandal who does that. They traded, what was that, 10, 15, how many years ago? 15 years ago for one guy in Nick Swisher, who technically was that guy. He wasn't for the White Sox, but
Euclid was another one, but yeah, there's been one.
That's the third name that comes up.
Just every now and again, they just kind of randomly grab a guy that just happens to be good at getting on base, and then just forget about it for a while and go back to their guys that just hit homers. And we've seen homers. That this White Sox team has hit some homers, which is a nice sign to see. But they've all been of the solo variety, You can see a team like Atlanta that hits a lot of homers. Like the real dangerous thing about the teams that can put the ball over the fence is that if you get a walk or a hit by pitch, like they're going to make you pay for 3 runs rather than 1. The White Sox aren't really that team.
This is what you get when you tune in, accidentally or not, because let's face it, you're tuning in accidentally. If this was appointment viewing for you, then I'm going to have to ask what's wrong, because we just sprung this on you in the first place. It wasn't in your TV guide. You can't find it. But this is what you get when you tune in to the spontaneous event that is a Sox Pop live event. You get our correspondent down in Atlanta right now, witnessing that horrifying game the White Sox are playing right now. She is the keeper of our Facebook. So if you're watching us on Facebook, even well after the fact, because let's face it, you're going to want to tune in probably all weekend just to take a look at this event, whatever this turns out to be. Melissa Sage Bolenbach, she is begging for us to get in trouble with the FCC or whoever else rules the internets and interwebs, because she is begging for some cussing over the game she is forced to watch, that pathetic, depressing Michael Kopech getting kicked around again. What is wrong with him? Is he even going to sit out the rest of the season now because something is still wrong with him? That is, according to Adrian Serrano, our number 2 or possibly number 1. Yeah, it hurts, but we're going to just keep laughing.
When you really start to like peel away the layers, there's BB.
There we go.
When you really start to peel away the layers of what the future looks like, it's bleak. As bad as this year has felt, we could be in a position where like we're longing for the days to even complain about a talented guy on paper not succeeding, because we're just we're having a full team of tryhards. We got 9 Zach Remelards, out there every day hoping for the best.
Yeah. And I promise we will spin into the draft that we promised, because again, I know you circled this on your calendar. This was appointment viewing for you out there, dear viewer and listener, to say, okay, come on, guys, get the draft. I'm excited about the draft. Get the draft. Yeah, of course we will. But yeah, that is the problem. As you try to pick your brain, Adrian, about who could actually be a legitimate next arm up. And the truth is, the answer is there is nobody who is the next arm up. Of course, Davis Martin, pre Tommy John surgery, was a guy who surprisingly acquitted himself rather well in 2022. So that was not an unfair arm to count on as, say, your 6th guy. Fine. Sean Burke is a guy who was being expected, an older guy moving up quickly through the ranks, now still at Charlotte, dealing with a little bit of injury and effectiveness. Not unrealistic to say, okay, that guy's in a mix if we need a spot start. Fine. That's 2. There aren't anybody. Christian Mena, perhaps, he's a double-A pitcher. He's 20 years old. Maybe he just turned 20. He's 20 years old. Has shown flashes. He's 20 and he's in double-A. He's not a guy who, unless he really is going to set the world on fire, and there's no indication that a 20-year-old guy is ever really going to be able to do that, a guy who could leap maybe for a spot start. So we're talking about maybe being too deep in starters, legitimate starting pitchers, not the Tukey to Saints or who.
Yeah, Schultens has been pretty good, but again, 29, like he's not the future, like he's a guy that just like he's nice to have to eat some innings, but like that's not a guy that you're building. I don't think any team that would be going into a season to be competitive would have a Jesse Schultens as a 1 through 5. That's a 6th, 7th starter that you're going to need, but you're not putting that guy on a rotation.
And note, dear listeners and viewers, we are making Melissa wait. We're going to make her wait the full 6.5 hours of this live program before we do cuss about this game. We're building up to it, but come on, we got, it's called a teaser. It's called a teaser. We're teasing you. But yeah, okay. As a seg then, Adrian, from the malaise and the depression of the 2023 Chicago White Sox, currently about to go, what would it be? The number is getting so big, it's hard to keep count. 17 games below 500 and something like 9 or 10 games out of first place. By the way, first place being somewhere around 500. So it's not as if someone's run away with the division and we can pat ourselves in the back and cry ourselves to sleep saying, well, geez, it was just a miracle year for Cleveland or Minnesota or Kansas City or something. No, it's just a bad team. But segging into the draft, one thing that certainly wasn't addressed. So, I mean, as much as we're going to feel good about the draft, something that wasn't really addressed was any sort of legitimate, dependable arm. In Taylor in the 2nd round, we have a guy who could, but there certainly was no. There's definitely, as much as a lot can be, there's no sort of drop dead guy, and you're pretty much going to have to go 1st or 2nd round to really get that, for sure guy. The White Sox did not really spend a pick on that guy during our live as the draft was happening. The 3 of us, Tommy and Malachi and I, we're all pretty disappointed at who the pick was. We'll get to talking about Gonzalez in a bit, but I mean, the pitching, starting arms, sustainable arms certainly were not addressed in this draft. You may disagree, but I mean, that certainly means we've skipped, more or less, we've skipped a year in sort of replenishing any sort of arms, which sort of don't exist in the first place. Certainly in the higher minors, we're not, the cupboard's still empty, Adrian.
Yeah. I know some people think, pretty highly about Taylor, who they got in the 2nd round, Grant Taylor. But I think you'll find just as many people that are like, he's all right. He could be something, maybe. I don't know. There's just none of those guys, like you said, have that, all right, this is a guy, like there was probably a handful of them that went in the 1st round that like you knew that like maybe this isn't going to be a number 1 starter, but this is going to be a major league pitcher at some point, and that's really what, more than anything, they're missing just throughout their system. They don't have guys that are like those are going to be major league pitchers, whether in the bullpen, whether wherever. Like, they're going to be major league arms. They have a lot of guys that have 1+ pitch, maybe 1.5+ pitches, and we're going to try to figure out a third pitch for them to be viable at any other level, and like,
Right.
that works for some guys, but that can't be like the plan going in from top to bottom through your rotation, that everybody is a reclamation project, or everybody is a, hey, if we just develop this pitch that they might or might not have. I mean, I guess unless you're Tampa, who's, just bring them in, we'll teach them a sweeper, we'll give them a sweeper and they'll be okay. Yeah, like they just look at the guy's arm or something and say, like, he could throw a sweeper, and then they'll get him in there and do something. Like, we don't have the infrastructure there in that way. There's like, there's a comment like, all draft choices aren't projects. They all are projects, but some are full, gut rebuilds, and some are I just gotta, put the finishing touches on the front of the house, curb appeal kind of things,
And we're not expecting, Adrian, in the 5th round that you're getting a guy that in 2 years you can plug into a major league rotation. Of course, we're not as unrealistic as we can be, as again, gallows humor as we employ in all of these programs and our writing at Southside Sox. I think we're also realistic. We try to be intelligent fans. We try not to apply too much meatheadery to everything, but we run down the pitchers. We've got our 2nd rounder in Grant Taylor, a guy who's coming off of injury, did not even pitch last year. Certainly there's promise. Certainly there's promise as a starter, but he's not even by no means a lock as a starter. Again, who's a lock for anything? I know, we're all day to day, right? But okay, the point is, as we're going through some of these names, we want one to jump out to say, okay, seems legit. Even as much as a stretch as even a Jonathan Stever was. He was a starter. He was a guy that obviously turned them. He's from Indiana. Somehow the White Sox didn't choose anybody from Indiana, I don't think, this year, which is bizarre on what's going on. That now it's just Ole Miss, nobody from Indiana any longer. But they have a strong hold in terms of their scouting there. So they saw this guy and said, all right, projectable, all these weird buzzwords that get used, but okay, projectable to be a legit starter who's not necessarily not going to be a starter. Of course, until he ran into injury, he was. Seth Keener, 3rd round, okay, but he's still a guy who's this sort of tweener arm. We're not sure in terms of his control or his endurance if he's even going to be able to sustain. I know some of that is you spin them into the pros to find out how they do stick. Obviously, starters gravitate to the bullpen and not almost never the other way around. But again, Christian Oppor, certainly a guy they had their eyes on even a year ago. Mm-hmm. But I mean, this is the Noah Schultz category of raw, extremely raw. And I know we're not, especially after this year, we're not drafting for win now, because win now I think has flown out the window. So maybe this is the right move to go, but this isn't anybody who's going to replenish it anytime soon. Lucas Gordon in the 6th round, you see a guy like maybe he's like a Tommy Summer, which is not bad, but he's probably not going to be a major league arm. So now we've got through pretty much the top 10 picks, impact guys, and we may have no starters, which is an interesting direction for the White Sox to have gone.
Exactly. You get to like Zach Franklin's like the one guy I'm looking at, like, all right, that guy looks like he could probably pitch, but that's probably not a starter. That's probably somebody that's going to be in the bullpen maybe within the next 2 years. Like, he's probably an older guy that's going to move a little faster. Which is historically what they would generally do. So I have faith in them to be able to look at those older guys in college and say, all right, this is what I can turn him into as far as a major league arm out of the bullpen or not. To your point, like, where is the pitching version of Jacob Gonzalez? Jacob Gonzalez is not going to like wow everybody, but like, everything points to Jacob Gonzalez being a very solid player and probably a major league player at some point. How good, you don't know. It could go any direction. All of these guys are, lottery tickets at the end of the day. There's very few that are, the Adley Rushmans that like, oh yeah, we're going to really have to mess this up for him not to be great because he's already great. But Jacob Gonzalez looks like a major league piece. We just need more of those pitching prospects that look like that, like basic, all right, that's what a potential major leaguer looks like. And, very much you went through that whole list of that, top 6 guys, and like 1 or 2 of them could end up being something, that's just the way this works. But it kind of starts to go against process over results. Like we see it at the major league level. They kind of just throw things at the wall and see what sticks. And it kind of still, I like their direction more. They have more direction than I've seen from them in the past over the last 2 years. They seem to have some idea of what they're trying to do. We can see patterns in the players that they're maybe forecasting and picking, but still I don't see them having this is what we rally around and we know we can do this with these types of players. Like it all kind of seems like if we get him into the system and he just gets healthy, oh boy, watch out. And like, I don't trust them with injuries on any level. So somebody like Grant Taylor could be very good. I would give him probably a 10 to 20% better chance to be really good in another system, not this system. Just because I don't think they handle injuries well on any, from the top to the bottom.
Yeah, much less a guy coming in, injured. And by the way, this wasn't a guy who fell to the fifth because he's hurt and couldn't. And let's face it, guys with that kind of talent don't fall, 5 rounds. I get it, but I mean, this isn't like wow, we could not pass up on him. This is we're using our second round pick on this guy who is, frankly, question mark. This whole idea of getting your Tommy John surgery out of the way.
Exactly. Just let's take a step back and forget about the player and think, what do you have in your system and what have you built in the last 10 years as a system to be able to just take chances on injured players like that in the second round when there are guys that probably could be those middle of the road major leaguers that just fill out your system and have, better chances of fielding a competitive team and have guys that come up. Like you see the teams that are better at this than the White Sox can, continuously have guys that can come up and play and they don't all turn into superstars. Like somehow it seems like the Dodgers constantly bring guys up that turn into superstars, but
and they're trading away half of the system as well. So it's the half that's left and they're still coming up. And it's like, oh my God,
they can trade with impunity sometimes because they know that they could replace that with somebody else. They have other guys down there.
Yeah.
It's just I don't want to be, feel negative. Like I feel better about this. I am feeling positive. I want all of these guys to succeed, obviously.
We're going to come around the corner, Adrian, and we are going to get more positive. We're going to still dwell on a little bit more negative for a second here. And we are checking out the comments. John, we will at least address one of the issues you brought up because the Kopech sale trade is a fascinating one. I've got thoughts on it. Adrian may as well, and I'm sure you do as well, John, in addition to a launch angle. Hey, love to have you here, John. But here's something that surprised me, and I only really dug into it right before we came on because again, what was the play? It wasn't in my date book. It just popped up somewhere, and I said, "Oh, well, geez, I better go on." But here's the thing: we were disappointed, and this is no offense against Jake Gonzalez, as you pointed out. Probably, certainly legit guy, 18th ranked MLB pipeline. We picked him at 15. Okay, so fine. We'll call that a wash. Cool. Obviously, there's something they saw in him that made him more attractive than the 6,000 other shortstops available. But we were disappointed in that. Obviously, because you're picking as important as shortstop is, and as much as a shortstop can move to center field or can move to third base or could become a left fielder or for all we know, become a catcher and certainly a first baseman can't do any of those things. I get it. I get that you want the flexibility. If it's just you're picking out of a hat, you hope that you pick the position of shortstop because that is the most dynamic position out there. As much as I get that, I hadn't even realized that if you just go strictly by MLB pipeline rankings, and I know some of these guys are preps and the White Sox perhaps are still in win now mode. I don't know why, but maybe they are. Gonzalez was ranked behind 3 guys who were picked after him. I mean, he definitely wasn't the best shortstop at the moment. And the idea that there were and again, I know this is all rankings, who cares? But there are 3 guys. It wasn't just 1 or 2. 3 guys ranked higher than him. That was just in the first round. Maybe there's a guy who went even in the second round who was ranked higher than Gonzalez. So the idea that there was something so special about him when really, as a prospect, he doesn't seem off the charts remarkable. He seems to be just solid. Not even maybe Colson Montgomery upside. And obviously we're seeing that play out in real time in the system right now. Just makes you question when every other position, literally every other position in the system is pretty bare. Maybe you could say second base just because there is a nice collection of middle infielders is really actually pretty bare. It's just odd that you strike.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, I can respect a front office that does their homework, sees their guy, and goes and gets their guy. You know, however your board lines up, but I don't know if you can give the benefit of the doubt to this front office. You know, we got a lot of fire Kenny Williams going on in the chat, and I don't know. I
John
don't
definitely wants us to know.
Kenny was okay
John
as
O'Donnell.
GM. I don't know what Kenny's done as president to justify his position, because
he's not the first guy you fired. Let's put it that way. He's not the first guy you fired.
He wouldn't be the first guy fired, but he oversees the first guy fired. So, you know, there's always culpability in that. He handpicked that guy to be in this position. So there's no decoupling them at this point. But, you know, Brian Shaw is on this roster.
Yeah.
Like, that's how little you have. So I can understand when you are that empty, taking some middle ground guys. But then, like I said, you take the middle ground guy, which, all right, I can understand that's where maybe you're going to just try to take some solid guys that you think could be actual impact guys. And then you immediately come and start taking lottery tickets the next round, you know? So, like, again, like, you don't have a set plan that I can say, all right, I see where they're going with this. They're going to try to build up something more solid, you know, and then once you have that stability and that certain amount of guys that you know will keep churning through, and maybe you'll find some decent guys out of there, or be able to turn some of these decent guys into projects for other teams. And, you know, you have to have the currency to play that game. They don't have the currency to play that game. Like, we're talking about buying and selling this year. Like, what do they have to buy with? Like, they have 2 guys, you know, like, and they don't want to get rid of them because then they don't have anything else. So, like, you don't have a system. You have a couple of guys that might be interesting. And I think, you know, with the last 2 years at least have been better moving again forward. I don't know that this front office as constructed is going to push towards, you know, fixing things. I think they're kind of in their last, you know, the last defense of whatever they thought they were building, and they, it's not going to go down clean, and it's not going to go down pretty.
Yeah. We're for the purpose of our podcast, we're going to take a pause, even though live, because of that means, Adrian, that means you and BB have to just freeze because we're taking a break. But we'll be back. We're actually going to talk about something positive coming out of the draft. We'll probably get negative again real quick because, after all, it's the White Sox podcast. If you tuned in or are listening, what did you expect? It's the 2023 White Sox. How can it not be negative? But we are going to freeze for just a moment. Be back on the other side of the podcast and live. Hey, just watch BB riff a little bit. Okay, White Sox fans, we are back on the podcast live. Well, we never left. Yeah, you're watching us, listening to us. It is Sox Pop live event, spontaneous live event number 3, I believe, podcast number 154. It's just the math. I have to do all the accounting because otherwise, they'll pull us off the air. The FCC is very, very they're picky. What can you do? But let's lead off this second half of this all-night 18-hour podcast. Let's lead off the second half of it, Adrian, and talk about something positive. I think it's positive. I mean, I made the joke about I'm not sure if it was when we were on or off, but coming on or before we came on or on. But the White Sox did finally, the front office apparently did get through Moneyball. They have read it all now, and that is reflected in these draft picks. I'd say one trend that is nice to see. Not that you're going to pass up on George Wolcott, who's going to just thump the hell out of the ball. And he's going to whiff a bunch of times too. Okay, fine. No problem. When you hit the ball at 450 feet, cool. But your nuts and bolts guys, the guys who aren't necessarily going to knock balls off the wall, you need to be able to get on base in some way possible. And the White Sox aggressively went over those types of players. And I'm not sure if we've had a draft where we've seen this number of guys who can just simply get on base. And I would say, again, 20 years too late, perhaps, Adrian. Yeah. However, better late than never. It was nice to see a number of guys. You want to call them grinders, you want to call them madrigals, you want to call them punch and Judy guys, but guys who can get on base seem to bring some of that Remolardian spirit or Mendikian work. And I mean, there's something to be said for that. We're not going to go just small ball, we're not going to lose our minds here and say, all 9 guys got to be able to bunt. That that ship has sailed. We're in the 21st century. It's not happening anymore. But the idea that there are guys who might be able to grind their way up the system and maybe participate or contribute in some way, rather than just, I don't know, throwing darts, whatever this was, utility guys in the past, it was just maybe just throwing darts, or, hey, it's round 26, let's pick Danny Mendick. I would say that is maybe the brightest aspect of this draft.
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm on the record for being really excited about Riku Nishida. I don't know if they're going to be able to sign him. Like, I hope, that he'd be interested in coming over with a real chance to, make an impact in an organization like this that has a big hole as far as a second baseman in the history. But just a guy like that just has really great bat control, that takes great at bats. And it's nice that George Wolkow is a guy you don't pass up. He's the type of hitter they would generally pick in the past, but he's a 17-year-old. Normally they would be drafting a 24-year-old version of that, right, and then having a year and a half to try to get them, into the major leagues, and not having, like, now you literally can let this kid sit and develop and hopefully, not strike out as much, and actually put in the work and try to become something. I think it's just a different type of pick that they wouldn't have made traditionally in the past, even though he's not one of the guys you're speaking of, the high OBP guys. Like, he is something that they would generally avoid those almost, he's not technically prep, but he kind of is. He's in the middle. He's a weird case, but yeah, you wouldn't normally see them go for those younger guys like that.
Mm-hmm. We welcome in, as the third leg in our tripod of terror here on our Sox Pop Live edition number 3. It's Dante Jones, also getting his feet wet on the live broadcast. As you can tell, Dante, and you're hopping in right at the positive assessment of the draft portion. We've got a lot of negativity already out of our system between Adrian and me and BB the cat. And we will get back, I'm sure, to some of that negativity as well. But I'm wondering if there is, give me some sunshine coming out of the draft, something that you may have felt that was a positive sign, a player trend in your eyes, because it clearly was a little different sort of draft for the White Sox, and it did seem to be in potentially positive ways. I'm curious of your assessment.
The way I looked at it is, I don't hate everything they did. I don't hate it. Just something I haven't been able to say
There's a t-shirt.
too often. Like, I'm not the biggest draft Nick. I'm not gonna lie and say I am, but none of these, like you said, they got a 17-year-old that looks more like Andrew Vaughn, like profile, than Andrew Vaughn does right now, which is funny to me. Like, that's the style of player they often go for. And hey, if you're gonna go for it, it's better to do it at 17, 18 with someone that you can build up potentially to be good, than to do it with a well-known college bat that, like, you have to hope already can see, like, major league hitting sooner than later. But
of course, we could go negative on that and say that
also, since I told Melissa, well, listen, I was like, since I told Melissa that I will do it, Jesus Christ, this team fucking sucks.
You did promise it, and we told Melissa, listen, we're teasing until later in the broadcast before we actually cuss this team out for being so horrible. But okay, promise fulfilled. Melissa, Dante, he came through for you, and the FCC, they're ringing the phone right now. I'm not picking up because we're going all night in assessing our White Sox negatively. The scary thing, what you say, Dante, though, is developing this guy, and that's a scary thing. And I think the White Sox have proven to be a little scared of that, which is why they're picking these guys that are supposedly ready. Zach Collins, ready bat. Gavin Sheets, ready bat. Andrew Vaughn, ready bat. Nick Madrigal can start for the team the day after the draft, ready bat. Because I'm not sure, as much as they might want to beat their chest about it, I'm not sure they have much confidence in their development because we haven't seen it. Maybe Colson Montgomery might be the first in a while. I know I'm missing somebody and I'm cheating the White Sox here, but the idea that Walco is going to be like, oh yeah, well, we'll develop him. Fingers crossed. Hopefully, maybe in spite of the White Sox instruction, he can be an impact player on the major league level.
Yeah, I mean, a guy to watch is Tim Elko. Let's see how they work with Tim Elko, another guy that strikes out a lot but has huge power potential. If he can, get down just in the low 20s, that's a guy that could really be a thing. You can't strike out 30% and be a play that actually matters in the system. But if you can get that down, so that's a guy that they can look at and say, what are we doing to help him develop and, strike out less and get a better control of the zone? And can we, take this and, continue to develop it with somebody like Wokow?
At this point, John Reiner, if I've got that name right, John, he's practically the fourth member of this podcast at this point. But he brings out the fact that White Sox are they're dipping in this well. Our joke now is that Ole Miss is whatever their go-to move is. Frankly, crazily enough, they seem to pick a lot of TCU guys, which is weird. But I mean, the Ole Miss, the SEC thing, but specifically Ole Miss. And I wonder, Adrian, or when Dante comes back. Your thoughts on whether that, again, is that just lazy shorthand? We know it's a good program. They won a national championship a year ago, so let's just pick those guys. Or is it, hey, let's strike from obviously we had LSU going 1-2 this year, coming off a championship. So that's not a stretch, but then it might almost be too easy to say, well, they know how to win. It's SEC. I'm sure in the NFL, 95% of draft choices come out of SEC because they win national championships every year. I don't care about college football. Sorry, college football. But I mean, the same might be applying to the SEC because it's a darn good baseball conference as well. Is it shorthand? Is it a shortcut for the White Sox, or is there something to mining those players?
I think we'd have to actually dig into the numbers to see how the draft at large, not just the White Sox, goes. But I think definitely on paper and just the the backhanded look at Rick Hahn and, Kenny Williams running the show and all of the guys that they put in place makes it feel like they just kind of watch the College World Series and say, I got that guy. What about this guy? There's this guy on our board.
Who won this year? Who won last year?
But I think coming into why I'm even with their kind of, not a stellar draft, but a pretty solid draft. I'm still feeling good about it because this also comes on the back of them, signing a bigger group of international people than they generally have in the past. So there are some things that are even for the White Sox, just, moving the needle, ticking over into all right, this is real professional baseball stuff now. We're getting to the point you need to have as many lottery tickets as possible because that's what these prospects are at some point is lottery tickets. And how many really big trades have been, accomplished with, a handful of 14 and 15-year-old, international prospects. You don't know what they are going to be yet. Fernando Tatis, we didn't know what he was yet. He was kind of a beanpole. You didn't know if he was going to put on muscle, turned into a great player. Those kind of guys, when they're young, they're still so malleable that they hold so much more value to the imagination of the GMs across the league that I think just weaponizing that alone makes your system a little stronger. So if we can bring that mentality into the college draft and really have a team that scours through everything, I would hope that they are, but you really don't know. I mean, they did draft the first or second. We don't know for sure yet. I don't know if we ever got it confirmed. The first or second French, citizen. So maybe this is just us looking self-fulfilling prophecy of them, being lazy, but just the numbers might work out that just most teams are pulling from the SEC because that's just where the teams play all year and that's where they're good.
Yeah, the question, Dante, you sort of took a pause out, but the question was, brought up out of what John had said about the SEC, and do we think that the fact that the White Sox are now leaning really hard on Ole Miss, that seems to be their pet team now, is that lazy? Is that shorthand? Is that smart scouting? Obviously, it's better to go after Ole Miss than Harvard. No offense, Ivy League, but so I mean, obviously there's some logic there, but is it just? I think, as Adrian joked, is it just that they tuned into a couple games on ESPN during the College World Series, or is this a smart strategy for the White Sox?
I think it could be a smart strategy. The issue is that it's the White Sox doing it. Like the strategy does work out like in other leagues. Like say, like for example, you could call certain college football like certain colleges defensive back you or linebacker you or wide receiver you. And like we've seen the NBA teams and like back in the past, the Big East and like these other divisions, like there are certain like divisions that are the cream of the crop. The issue is that the White Sox don't know how to develop players, just like the Bulls don't know how to develop players on the other side of the Reinsdorf family. So it doesn't matter who you're picking if they can't do anything if you can't turn them into the potential star level. Like we've seen so many players get drafted, and across baseball, you see so many players get drafted and turn out to be nothing because it's such a crapshoot. Like Adrian was saying, you just don't know until these players get to the majors because it's such a big jump from high school to college, from college to single A, double A, triple A. And they say certain jumps are easier than other jumps, but like you can see that it's difficult for players to make that jump still. And if you have a franchise like the White Sox teaching you how to make that jump, then it's gets a lot more difficult than say you have a franchise like the Braves or the Dodgers teaching you, oh, so that's the next step. So it could work well, or it could just be another failed thing like Project Birmingham. So we'll see.
Yeah, because there's a lot smarter teams in the White Sox, but even with all of these really smart teams, like I think 14 Division II players got drafted, so like they're kind of all coming from, the same pool. So like I think everybody's just kind of like they don't want to pay to develop these guys when the college will develop them for free and they'll just take them later. Like there's also like will we be able to sign them? Like a lot of these guys will hold on if they think they could be a little better off next year than this year. Like that's like it's surprising that a guy like George Wolkow didn't go because he probably would have been maybe a second rounder, third rounder next year. At the very least, rather than where he went to the Sox, I think in the 7th this year. So it's a very complex system in general. So I think it's just built in a way that filters it to Division I and then filters it to down to 2, maybe the West Coast teams, the Pac-10 teams, and the SEC teams, and then SEC because of the size of those schools, even if they're not football schools, with those baseball programs, still get some of that money. So they're going to have stuff to offer, especially with the name, image, likeness stuff going forward. Like just they can't help but being the biggest kids in the class.
Yeah. I'm going to bounce a couple of things right back in a similar vein to both of you. But first, again, maybe we're even supposed to question their reaching out internationally. We got Matthias Lecomte, I believe established as the second French player, maybe first French pitcher, perhaps, national drafted. Shout out to all our friends now listening and following us in France, because then, right after that, it's like, okay, this was the international phase in the middle of the draft, because then you got Riku Nishida, who I think might not be the first Japanese born player drafted by the White Sox, but I'm guessing the first actual Japanese player, not maybe, I don't know, a military situation or something, actual Japanese player born in Osaka, drafted by the White Sox. Great to have him in the fold. And again, hello to all our new friends following us in Japan and fans of Nishida. But I mean, again, as much as we can make a joke, okay, well, I guess just I go international in the middle of the draft. We have an example of we might be seeing with Wolkow already from the 2020 draft, when the White Sox pulled a very similar move, not quite as dramatic a drop from cusp of the third round talent in George Wolkow, falling to the 7th, but we had Jared Kelly, a guy who was looked at as mid-first round talent, but had a strong commitment to University of Texas. I guess scared teams off, or maybe word had gotten out. White Sox were talking to him. I mean, I'm not really sure how that played, but the truth is the guy dropped 20-ish, 30th picks in that weird 5-round draft. A guy that the White Sox put a ton of money into. They punted the other 3. I mean, no offense to the 3 guys who got drafted, but they sort of punted those picks in terms of putting money out, because they basically were going to put it all into Garrett Crochet and Jared Kelly. Now, Jared Kelly got into the system, strangeness of COVID, of course, and everything, like getting screwed up, there. delaying development, but this is a guy who struggled pretty much throughout. This year struggled to the point where he was thrown into the bullpen of just like, okay, let's see what happens here. And it clicked. He's now pitching like the guy who was the first round talent that fell to the second. Now, you could criticize the White Sox for it taking maybe a couple of years to figure this out, that there was maybe a mental block, or maybe there was even something physical he was doing in taking the ball to start games, where get him in the bullpen and then make him a bulk guy. I think he might be back to starting now. At any rate, he is putting in starters innings, whether he's starting games or not. I mean, he's also a young guy, so maybe it's just maturity there. I don't know if that's necessarily pro White Sox, that it took a couple years, but now it seems like there's some momentum for Kelly and for him maybe moving through the system, or is it an indictment because now by the time George Walcott is going to be any sort of factor, well, he might as well have gone to college, because, it's going to be a few years before we can even see any of that potential in him even starting to sniff moving up where in the system. Applying it to Jared Kelly, is it necessarily an endorsement or an indictment of what the White Sox bring to players in terms of developing them?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to what I was saying, like where teams look at a guy like Jared Kelly, like, well, maybe let him go to Texas for 2 years and see him put that work in without us paying for it. Like Jared Kelly is still only 21 years old, like only pitched, I think, like 140-ish innings, 130 maybe only in the 3 years that he's been in the system. So injured, that really weird 2020 season kind of wreaked havoc on a ton of prospects across baseball, but Jared Kelly was one of the higher ceiling guys at the time that kind of got washed underneath 2020 and never really came back up for air until we just started to get word from him this year. But I think with the risk involved with all these guys, like I think that's the risk reward. Like, how fast do you think your team and your system and your guys down in single A and high A can get these guys up to speed? And if it's less than 2 years, all right, we can, if he's not in double A or moving probably within those first 2 years, like maybe it's best to just leave him on the draft board and take somebody that you can do something with. Let somebody else take a chance on him, or let him go back to college and continue to develop somewhere else, because it's just not worth holding on to at some point. Like, you'd like to have his rights, but did he keep you from taking somebody that maybe is helping right now or more ready to be a starter next year, when you need a starter next year? You don't need a starter in hopefully 3 years.
Dante, your thought about how maybe the Jared Kelly scenario could apply to George Walcott or just some of the other players in general who may have been. The White Sox do graduate a lot of guys to the majors. They are by far not. I want to say they were right in the middle. I know the Mets were really low in terms of WAR value over the, I don't know what the period was, last maybe 15 years of drafts. Somebody came out with a chart there. White Sox were in the middle. wasn't really bad. Maybe toward the bottom of the middle, but not the worst. So they are. They've got guys on their team now who they drafted and brought up through the system. So they're not striking out every time, but. Is the Kelly thing indicative of something we might be able to see the White Sox eventually getting, or is it bad that we have to wait at all?
So the thing is, like, anything with 2020 involved is just like randomness, because that's what 2020 was. We all lived through it. So you can take some of that stuff with a grain of salt. There's dudes that played in the majors in 2020 that haven't sniffed the majors since, for example. So, like, take that with a grain of salt. And being in the middle development is about exactly what you expect for the White Sox in terms of just like mediocrity. They are mediocre. Therefore, being, like you said, like number 17, it checks out. Now, you can hope that him developing better now is a sign of things changing within the system. But again, I just don't have trust with the White Sox at this point. We was told that Nick Madrigal, like you said, could play from day one in the majors. We was told that he was going to have great defense and have great speed with a real high contact. And ask the Cubs how all of that's going right now.
High IQ.
Like,
that was another part that really we didn't see demonstrate.
Another thing to put like a grain of salt on that, even though they weren't at the bottom of that chart, for drafted WAR by drafted players, I think it was just below them was Atlanta, and Atlanta shows you that like while they are below the White Sox in who they've drafted and got WAR out of, like that's not counting any of their international signings. Like there's a lot of ways to continue to churn talent into your organization. And the White
spending
Sox
money
are bad at they're bad at the mainstream one. Yeah. There's many ways, and they're bad at some of the mainstream ones. So,
and that would have been an excuse the White Sox could traditionally use because they never had high picks. I mean, the number 3 and number 4, Madrigal and Vaughn, going back to back, that was freaky rare for the White Sox. Those are some of the highest picks they've ever had. I mean, Harold Baines was one. Rare. So. Yeah, I mean, even getting as high as Zach Collins, you're right. A 10-plus pick, a top 10 pick for the White Sox was rare. So, I mean, obviously, Atlanta can say, we're picking like 26. What do you expect from us? And, I get it for sure.
Yeah, we spent the entire 90s picking at the back half of this round. Like, we got to figure out another way to get people in here because this isn't going to be the way for us.
All right, let's stop being nice to those.
I mean, to think about it too, like
bags. Yes, Dante, give it to me.
Yeah, speaking of those guys, like. They're the ones that just beat the Whites, like score just one final. It's 9-0. Braves win, assholes win. And like the thing is,
welcome to the second half.
They are a great example of not everything's done through the draft because look at them and look at us. Look at them, look at us. Like there is a difference in how they do things. And as much as I hate that franchise for just the chop and everything. Calling Henry Aaron the name he's always said he didn't want to be called. All of those things. Like, they are really good at developing baseball players. It doesn't matter if you're talking pitchers, outfielders, infielders. They develop well. And sometimes, they're, again, in the middle, right with us, like right behind us, and developing players and, like, getting your draft picks to the majors. But it doesn't matter when you have, like,
sure.
Who on the White Sox in the last decade has been as good as Ronald Acuna Jr.? No one. Having Ozzy Albies, maybe Tim Anderson, and I would say Jose Abreu. Like in terms of just like production.
We've had one season of Jose Abreu on that level, one season of Tim Anderson on that level, and then one season of Luis Roberts so far on that level. Not all in the same season, unfortunately.
Yeah. If you like said that was 2021, then congrats. The White Sox might have went to the World Series and then got beat by the Braves. But instead they all put these seasons together at different times. Because the White Sox just don't have consistency, don't consistently draft great players. Notice how the 3 names I just said, Abreu, Anderson, and Robert, only one of those guys was a draft pick. 2 of those guys are international signings. Yohan Moncada was not one of our picks. He came from Boston, and if I remember correctly, international signing. Michael Kopech did not get picked by the White Sox. Lucas Giolito did not get picked by the White Sox. Lance Lynn obviously did not get picked by White Sox. There are draft picks they've made and they have came to majors and been productive, but there's a lot of examples of international players being the bread and butter for the White Sox.
I'd say the White Sox have established they can get guys to the majors. Productive is another question because Gavin Sheets getting in the majors is, hey, listen, that is a benchmark that you say, all right, you matriculate a guy to majors. Totally. But then, okay, so they do. Carson Fulmer made it to the majors. No argument. You can't call Carson Fulmer out and out bust. He made it to the majors. He bounced around organizations. He was a major leaguer, even though he was a nothing major leaguer. And some of these guys who are on the Nick Madrigal, who got traded, seems to be destined to be a nothing major leaguer.
It's a major league player.
Yeah,
Gordon Beckham was not great, but he played in the major leagues. You need those guys in your system. You need major league players, and that's what we started this podcast talking about. Like really, what they miss more than anything, not only the high end guys, but they don't have a ton of guys that you look at and say those are major league guys. They have a couple guys. Maybe Lenin Sosa, Brian Ramos, like that I think could be, but like we have to let them see them get up and play. Actually, you can't just, at some point they proved all they can in the minors. You have to let them play at the major league level, and you keep giving reps to a 29-year-old, first time major leaguer or a 34-year-old journeyman infielder. Like You're going to have to see if these guys can play at the major leagues because you really don't have anything to lose, and you don't have anything else coming behind them that says like, all right, we got talent coming. We got major leaguers here. You got guys that you hope. And that comes back to the White Sox entire motto of operation is just let's throw it down on the board and hope that it works out.
Yeah.
Let's hope they stay healthy. Let's hope guys have some career years. Let's hope the rest of the division stays bad. Let's hope that, some things work out in our favor. We get a little lucky and it'll work out.
And it's a different podcast topic. I brought it up with Darren on the Farm podcast many times, and he's never had a good answer for me because there isn't a good answer for me. Having that attitude, Adrian, of just sort of like, let's roll the baseballs out there. Let's drop the bats and let's just see who stars in Saturday afternoon's game in Little League is a great approach if you maximize everything. If you've got two DSL teams, if you've got two Arizona teams, if you're really aggressive, White Sox have been pretty aggressive with the undrafted free agents. Fine, cool. But the White Sox don't even maximize the number of players. So if it's just like, oh, that magic, well, look, that guy's still running. It's been a 50. We're on mile 50 of this race. He's still running. He must be a star. If you just want to do that no-brainer, just throw him out there. They don't even suit up enough guys to really see that type of lazy strategy. It's not the dumbest. Play it out.
Even some of the years that they've maximize the amount of money they can spend internationally, it's on 3 guys and 2 of them are 22 and 23 years old. So you're already limiting their potential. Because a lot of people go back to that Braves team in 2021. They rebuilt their entire outfield mostly on the back of trading a bunch of these really young 16, 17-year-old international prospects, because every year they churn through and they pick as many as possible and they have their scouts working really hard. And I don't know if the White Sox will ever want to pay the money that it takes to have the infrastructure and the expertise in as many places as they need it internationally to make this. The White Sox are desperately hoping to push for an international draft as part of the major draft, because then that could leverage it back in their favor to not want to spend the money on the people that it takes to put the infrastructure together.
Yeah. Because it's not just spending the money; it's knowing how to spend the money and picking the right guys. Obviously, the Braves struck pretty well there because they turned those chips, into their outfield. The White Sox, first of all, are too scared to even sign the guys. They trade the money away, and then when they do sign them, toss up.
They just don't want. You gotta be willing to spend money. You gotta spend money to make money. That's the motto, and the White Sox will not spend that much money until Reinsdorf is in the ground, probably. Which, dark way to look at it, but it's true. Yeah. Over the years, we've seen that Reinsdorf has signed 100 million plus contract and wasn't even on the South Side, despite the fact that people keep saying he cares a lot more about the White Sox than he does the Bulls. He spent the money for Zach LaVine in the league with a salary cap instead of spending money on anybody in the league without one.
You had me at he spent the money on Zach LaVine.
Because
go ahead.
Spend that money on, like you said, that second ASL team. It's just something you could have, and all it costs is money, and that money will pay itself back if you have competitive teams. We've shown last year that if you have a competitive team, or even a team that we think as fans might be competitive, the fans will come out and you will make your money back.
Versus this year,
cut costs.
Yeah. All right. Before we wind up, let's make sure we get to a couple other topics. One of our speed round topics is going to be the Chris Sale trade, because why not? We talked about it. I've written about it. It's fun to revisit all the time, and it was on John's mind, so we're going to address it. And we may or may not still cuss to please Melissa. Who knows? But let's just touch quickly. It may have already been covered. Dante came in a little later, so he may have new information, but Adrian as well. I'm interested in knowing what the best thing about this coming out of this draft is to you. It could be player, it could be trend. And, of course, the worst thing, this is the White Sox, so we're going to start worst. And, Adrian, I will let you tell me first what the bad thing coming out of this draft was.
The bad thing coming out of this draft is no bell cow. Hey, this is going to be a really talented guy. Noah Schultz coming out last year, you felt all right, this guy could be really good. Just has that it factor that everybody that's seen him said, like, all right, like
Mm-hmm.
they don't have any one guy that I think at the top end everybody says like, all right, this could be a star. That
right.
They have some guys that I like that are good baseball players
Mm-hmm.
that I think are professional acquisitions, but nobody that is nobody to hang your hat on.
Yeah, and to be fair, Noah Schultz, risky, but I think what you're saying is the upside is, oh my God, the upside is we don't even want to start comping, but the upside is pretty huge. And, through 13, 18, whatever it's been, innings, hey, so far so good. Don't pull a Jorge Vera, but come on, Noah, just keep it up. He's given up like, one hit ever, I think. So, whatever. Dante, the bad thing to come out of this draft for you?
I mean, honestly, a bad thing is like I'm looking at the draft picks and like it's funny how this team drafts players. Like this, the first pick was Jacob Gonzalez. You're drafting a shortstop when you have Colson Montgomery, who's supposed to be the top prospect on the team. You got Nishida, who's playing second base. Him being on like playing second base for his team would be great. The issue is, will he sign? I do like the fact that I see a lot of pictures. That's all. Like, you might as well get cheap bullpen help if you're gonna need it instead of getting the Rick Hahn super bullpen. So I'll take that over the Rick Hahn super bullpen any day of the week.
So
And
Rick,
but like at the end of the day, they're still drafting players at positions where it's like you already have a stop. You already have somebody you planned on being your shortstop of the future. Like, what's the point? And like, I'm not gonna be shocked next year when they like have to draft in the top 10 because they suck, and end up drafting like a first baseman that's
no,
years away
don't
from
do
being
that.
in the
Don't speak that
pros.
out into the world. Okay, I'll throw mine out, and that is as much as it was nice that there was some sort of payoff to what seemed so mysterious that the picks were, for lack of a better saying, uninspiring. I think speaking of what Adrian's saying, that that there was the seventh rounder and George Welcall being a guy like, okay, oh geez, all right, they were saving money early in the draft to get this guy, and he's a third round talent or second round talent. Cool, great. But the idea that all those picks leading up to it, there really was so. I mean, it gets similar to what Adrian's saying. Uninspiring. Seemed like some misses made. Maybe the time, given that replenishing of the system is, I think, somewhat necessary. There seem to be just odd, picks. I mean, even all the way up to the second round of, picking a guy who's, coming off of injury, who is presumably ready to pitch, I would guess next year, maybe a touch, this year. It's just the payoff for as much as pleasant a surprise it was that, Rick sort of got us there and said, okay, well, look what I got for you in the seventh round. It's like, well, hold on. 1 through 6 is where you can really make some hay. I'm not sure we made, any hay whatsoever. So sort of uninspiring in that sense. Okay, we're turning around. I'll send it back to Dante, and we'll go back around. The best thing, I'll see Adrian's so angry that I chose you, Dante, that he just left us. But Dante, the thing that was most inspiring coming out of the draft, player trend, something that you really sort of dug coming out of it.
I mean, again, like I just said, the comment about Jacob Gonzalez and the fact that like if him and Colson Montgomery both are like here, like what's the point? But also Jacob Gonzalez is like somebody that might have gotten drafted a little lower than he was expected to be drafted. So it is good to see players that other teams are like, I actually would have liked to have him. So like that's nice. It's shocking because again, the White Sox usually turn gold into shit instead of shit to gold. So
Shout out to Melissa.
I'm gonna get them all in while we live for her.
I think
do the Carlin run. Adrian, the thing that you pulled out of this draft, you were sort of digging the most.
I like them, taking the 17-year-old like in the seventh round. I know a seventh round doesn't sound like super aggressive to take a chance on somebody, but like for the White Sox, it's kind of surprising to see them there. I think Jacob Gonzalez, taking Jacob Gonzalez there, I think also kind of maybe shows their hand a little bit that they think that maybe Colson Montgomery is a third baseman going forward. I don't know if it's too early to say that. They kind of was talk about that already last year about Colson. But the good thing I think overall is that I think we can start to see at least the reveal of some sort of plan or some sort of like. I think the people at the top are still kind of at times just taking their guy or taking whatever they want to do. But I think some of these other things where you can see some guys, high OBP guys, high bat skill guys being taken. I think this is the filtering through of some other voices in the room starting to come through, and we're seeing somebody has an idea of the kind of players they want in the system. And while it's not a cohesive plan from top to bottom yet, it's nice to see that we have a bubbling up of some new ideas for a team that desperately needs new ideas.
Yeah, that's fair. I sort of threw mine out, and that was finally getting some guys with the bat control who can get on base, who aren't K first. When I do the minor league updates, when I'm looking at cold cats polls, I'm always looking at strikeouts. I know I'm picking on strikeouts because, you got to sell out to get the big hits, but, the guy's got 3 strikeout days in cold cat. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. And so I admit I bring in my bias to it. It was just so refreshing and so weird to see as we're going through the draft and as I wrote a number of those write-ups, to see these guys like, holy cow, wait, this guy was close to a 1-1 ratio of strikes to walks, which in the system there's Mario Camilletti right now, Terrell Tatum not even, because he walks a ton, but he strikes out even more. I mean, there's like nobody in the system right now. They probably drafted more guys who are that type of player than they have in the entire system right now, which is freaky crazy. But because I already used that, even though I just used all my time up, I'm going to say it's always cool with the White Sox, and this might just be every team gets to do this, but that they always seem to find at least a reliever who is a guy that they've pegged as someone can move through. We've seen Tristan Stevers, who was that Texas State guy a year ago, who I said, man, I think I might have wrote him up last year, Adrian. I know we traded off on some, but he was a saves leader for the nation. He was an older guy, so it's like, man, this guy could move. And hey, he just did get called up to Double-A Birmingham. Maybe he was a little slow going into the draft, but a year later, he's at Double-A. Who knows? Not going to bias TCU here, but Garrett Wright, the guy they picked up, again, saves leader for TCU, older guy, seems to have some stuff that's sort of wicked for a 599th overall pick. Again, it's pretty weird to tab that as, that's the favorite. The favorite part of the draft was the 20th rounder. Brett, you're an idiot. I already know that, so you don't have to tell me that. John O'Donnell, just save it. John, I love you. Thank you for being here, but you're reinforcing what's a little spooky about Facebook. I'm not sure we need that message 48 times. Please try to control yourself. We can get into a whole Kenny Williams thing. I don't want to do that because I'm not siding with you. But anyhow, let's finish up with a topic suggested in our chat from one of our dear viewers, not one of them in Osaka, Japan, not one of them on the outskirts of France, outside of Paris, but in fact, probably from right here in the USA. And that is, let's assess briefly, of course, it could be a whole podcast, to assess the Sale, Moncada, Kopech trade. When I wrote about it a couple of years ago, I want to say, it seemed like it was almost a no-brainer. The White Sox would at least get what they needed out of that trade, just in terms of sheer WAR, in terms of sheer production. Of course, since then, there haven't been super overwhelming results, but of course, Chris Sale has not pitched for Boston either. I know he won them a World Series. I know he had a couple starring years. They also paid him a ton, and let's not forget the fact that Chris Sale absolutely was not staying with the White Sox. There is no way he was signing with the White Sox. So you had Chris Sale for a year and a half longer, so you cash him in. Arguably, this is one of Rick Hahn's finest trades, but I'm interested to know what Dante's thoughts and Adrian's thoughts on this are, because obviously this is subject to interpretation. It's not a no-brainer. So what do you guys think?
I mean, personally, like you said, when we were not going to have Chris Sale, he was not going to resign. My rule is, if you're not going to be willing, or the player is not willing to resign, and you know this well in advance, get something for them. And I know a lot of people have things to say about Yohan Moncada and think his head's not in the game and all the usual racial dog whistles that they love to use with players that aren't white. I'm just going to say it because it's true. But, like, Yohan Moncada, when healthy, has been a productive player. He hasn't been the best third baseman in baseball or anything, but he's been productive. Michael Kopech, I think, is a great case of White Sox mismanagement. They have, like, 2 straight years now. We see what happens when you make him throw too many innings and his arm starts to give out and he starts being not nearly as good. I mean, look at tonight, for example. And he just came off the IL. Like,
2 outs. Yeah.
yeah. So not the best start to his second half of the year, not the best way to come off the IL. But Chris Sale has barely played since 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Chris Sale. I have a Chris Sale jersey. I love that man. He was one of my favorite White Sox, especially growing up and stuff, because I remember where I was when he decided to cut up the jerseys. You know what I mean? He's an asshole, but he was a great pitcher in his prime. And the fact that he never won a Cy Young and will never win a Cy Young makes me sad. That being said, that is the second best trade Rick Hahn has ever made, probably.
Mm-hmm.
The first being Cease and Eloy for Jose Quintana.
Mm-hmm.
By far a better trade.
Yeah, he didn't blow them. Whether you love them or not, he definitely did not blow them, and they probably are tilted in the White Sox favor. Adrian, is your take similar, or how you feel about it?
I mean, firstly, I think John O'Donnell might be Rick Hahn. Rick Hahn might be watching this. So, Rick, if you're watching...
Or Ken Williams Jr., let's face it.
Yeah, Rick, if you're watching this, I think you got this one right. Just on the value of Chris Sale, about 16 WAR since he left, 15 WAR. Yohan and Kopech, even with Yohan missing a ton of time, even with Michael Kopech also missing a ton of time. Mm-hmm. So it's not even like you could say like, well, if Sale was healthy, like nobody's been healthy in this trade. But just the raw numbers, you got about 18 more, you gave up about 15 and a half. So like you won in that case. And Yohan Moncada has had a 4 WAR season. He's had a 5 WAR season. Like those aren't things that everybody does. Like, you know, like normal players don't just go on a heater and put up a 4 WAR season. You don't go on a heater and put up a 5 WAR season. Yeah. So like that's a legitimate guy. Unfortunately, he's not been able to stay healthy. Michael Kopech has showed you in at least one season that he could be a very dominant bullpen guy that comes in whenever you need big outs or innings and a spot starter, possibly even a closer maybe one day. They're dead set on getting him to start, and he can show you on a couple starts in a row that he can do it. But I think Malachi had the data the other day. Like you could just see in the data that when he gets more rest and he comes back, unlike, I mean, today maybe he came back a little early, I don't know, but generally when he gets some time off and he gets to be healthy, he comes back and he looks dominant again for a while. So maybe he's just not going to be a guy that you can count on as an every, fifth day starter, but like that doesn't mean you don't have value. You can see how a guy like Liam Hendricks in, his more limited role, you get to use him more than every 5 days. So like they can be very valuable. And like, so Michael Kopech still can be a very valuable player. And this trade, the Chris Sale trade can continue to be even more lopsided, but it's already one where I would say, not only Rick's best trade, but I think that one that he would do again and again if given the opportunity.
Yeah. There's value everywhere in a number of roles. We always want our best arms to maximize their innings. We want those guys. I mean, not the bullpen doesn't matter, but bullpen is far less important than getting those 5 guys who can give you 200 innings, which of course never happens anymore. So of course I don't blame the White Sox for pushing Kopech into the starting role, and I'm sure he wants that starting role because there's more glory there. There is more money there. Let's face it, that's out there. There's more prestige there. So of course he's going to choose that. It'd be nice if somehow they sort of troubleshoot this quicker. That maybe he's a guy who spot starts. Maybe he's a guy who gets a start, and then he works as more like not even a bulk guy, but maybe more in a hater role. Where the way they're talking about Garrett Crochet being now, thankfully, maybe because he's drafting behind Kopech, they're maybe being a little smarter with Crochet and not just insisting he's going to become a starter because he's a dynamic arm. We'd love him to start. Garrett Crochet is just not. He's not going to be a starter. So whether you try to get 3 innings, maybe you try and get 3 innings off of him. I don't know. But, that he's going to be a 5 innings plus starter, even though he's had those great games where he's, he had the perfect game going at New York a year ago. He's had some great no-hit efforts this year. But then he's also just completely lost his sense of control as well. So that's frustrating to know where you plug him in. But, in terms of the overall value of the trade, you had to do it. It probably was the best trade. I mean, come on, you're talking about a former number 1 overall prospect in Yohan Moncada. Kopech, despite some real flags because he was a hothead, there were issues. I don't mean to be dismissive and call him a hothead, but he clearly had some composure issues, as I did as a younger person, I'm sure, and I do as an older person, I'm sure. But they've matriculated him to the majors. He has contributed in the majors. He is clearly going to contribute in the majors going forward. The White Sox have him for probably about as long as they want him. They can plug him into a useful role. It is their job to not, destroy the car trying to rev it up and get onto the highway. Let's use him as smartly as possible. If it means he's got to take a hit to the ego, or that the White Sox need 4 starters or 5 starters next year because he's not among them at least every 5 days out. I mean, that's just what it's got to be.
Eventually, it's just got to be a math problem. It's like he doesn't seem like he's going to be able to get healthy enough to give you even 150 innings. So, like, if you're going to push to get him to 130, 140, but 25 to 30 of those are going to be like tonight, because he just can't handle the workload, then maybe, a high multiple inning kind of guy, or even an opener, kind of like use him in some interesting roles. Like, you could find other ways to get a very talented arm 100 innings, in the major leagues that isn't just getting the ball every 5 days.
Yeah. I'll put it like this. If Kopech was on the Braves, he'd be one of the best pitchers in baseball. I mean, not the Braves. If he was on the Rays, he'd be one of the best, like, middle reliever, opener, like, guy that comes in after opener types there is in baseball. Because the Rays, unlike the White Sox, know how to use that role. And, we've talked about before on pods and in the Slack and just in general about Brett's idea of a 6-man rotation. And at this point, I think it would be genius. I mean, look at how it works for Shohei over in Los Angeles / Anaheim. Like, it is something that can work. A 6-man rotation will have Kopech be the guy that throws 100 innings, but 50 of them are as a 3-inning start, a 3 to 6 inning starter, depending on if he has it that day. And 50 of them are 8th and 9th inning high leverage guy, because we see he has the stuff to be a high leverage guy. Instead of trying to
go ahead. Yeah, he does. He has the stuff to be a high leverage guy, and like, you think like, well, I'd rather have him be 150 inning starter eventually, but maybe if he's only throwing 100, but he's in more games, maybe that is a more value to you to be able to use him in more of the 162 games. You only have 27 outs in 162 games. Like, I want to try to use this tech guy that doesn't look like he can stay healthy as a starter. It doesn't look like he can handle the workload of every 5 days. Like, I want to try to maximize that arm that is still dynamite when he's on. Like, it's unhittable.
It's already been published by Sox. I can't charge you for it. I can't demand you hire me for it. And by the way, it's not a novel idea. There are teams actually that do it. My suggestion was the White Sox should be one of those teams. That would take not incredible intelligence, just sort of some basic putting pieces together, some basic numbers, willingness to game the system. The White Sox seem so averse to even using the system properly. They still can't use the injured list the right way. So for us to expect that they're going to be sort of crafty and saying, okay, it's redacted's time to just take a little break. Hey, Lance Lynn, your shoulder's feeling a little cranky, right? Wink. Well, take that break.
Days. Just, sit down. Go have a beer or something for a few days. Like,
sure. You missed the plane? Vacation. All right, stay home.
Like, go on a vacation that no one, like, go on a staycation because we already know the media would love
right.
it. Don't like disappear for a week or two. Like, get yourself some rest.
We don't know where he is. Like, I mean, we don't need to play with the bereavement list or anything, but just, okay, wait, he missed the plane. Yeah. Sorry, he has to sit at home. And Lance Lynn's at home, just playing 20 hours of video games. Like, okay, all right, guys, that's fine.
Just do the Joey Votto. Go play chess once a week or something in Canada. Just
the problem is that takes major league arms, and we have Brian Shaw on the roster. Like, we don't have major league arms.
The notion that we're, and I know you're not going to get 8 frontline starters somehow juggled on the White Sox roster.
8 actual the point starters.
Is, right. Yeah.
How many starters did the AAA team have last year? 3?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. They got out of the gate like, wow, this is impressive. They've really made a change. And I bet you by the end of the season, they're going to be close to about what the percentage was last year of guys who just are not starters starting games. It's just going to be all bullpen games, and it's just sickening because this is a major league organization, and it's not that complicated to pull just a few more Jesse Schultons out of the hat. They exist, and the idea that you can't say, "Hey, come to Charlotte, you pitch 3 good starts, and guess what? You're going to be on the south side." That's how easy it is. This isn't a Rays situation where you got to like do like gladiator battles to even get to probably Durham, for God's sake, or the Dodgers. Yeah.
Like you actually have, like, you don't have to try here because, like, the White Sox have 2 good
Stay on your feet.
And
I mean, even if you want to keep a traditional rotation and not have this, like, just the numbers show that like most teams need 7 to 9 starters or utilize 7 to 9 starters in a season. Like that's just how it works. Like people get hurt. Like you're not going to have guys that just go out there Iron Man and make every start. It just doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. They're still living in this world that they're gonna, have another 4 complete games in the, the playoffs someday. Like it's not gonna happen. Like the game is different now. The game has changed. So you need to start changing your thinking, and hopefully, some more voices in the room is a good start to that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as we summarize from the draft, we didn't really get those arms as it appears. I mean, who knows? I know I will admit I'm just throwing darts at the wall at this point, but it does seem like if you just look at the meat of who was drafted in terms of the arms, 10 pitchers, 10 hitters. So of those 10 pitchers, it definitely doesn't seem like an influx of what is necessary, what the system is aching for. And Rickon has not proven to be a guy who's clever enough to say, even though he's been more aggressive in bringing guys in. Brian Shaw was not with the team in spring training.
Tukey
not a good example.
Tukey wasn't.
Tukey, hey,
Tukey
he just saw him at the airport bar. It's like, hey, Tukey, what's up?
Yeah, Cueto was at least in the conversation starting before the year started last year. It
right, and Cueto said,
"Come in," but like
you're not going to meet my price. Forget
they had
it.
talked about him. Yeah, it's like so. Like they have been trying, but like part of that is just what else are they going to do? They have nothing else. Like they open the cabinet looking for snacks and there's just nothing.
Yeah, and yet the thing that they do have is a clear highway, no toll at all, to Chicago, because it's going to happen. The Sox have been not healthy, but relatively not. They haven't been that beat up, and yet who's coming up? Jesse Schulten's that he's like a miracle guy. I mean, there's no reason why Jesse Schulten should be pitching at all in the major leagues, and certainly pitching, well in the major leagues. Last year's Tanner Banks, whatever.
I keep saying that. Like if they had anybody worth anything right now, they'd be up here, but they just don't.
And it's only going to get more interesting once a few players likely leave the South Side, and what is now a 3-man-ish rotation goes down to who the heck knows what it would be, but.
Congrats to a bunch of dudes that didn't we just trade for what is his name? Mike Myers?
Mike Myers, yeah. We bought
Myers.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter at this point because again, he's gonna be the number two starter behind Dylan Cease in a few weeks, so it doesn't matter. Just get used to the name. I'm gonna have to learn it. I'm gonna have to do a few bird apps with him.
If you think that the podcast or the live programming, I mean, aside from John O'Donnell and his very single-minded focus, if you think they've been a little crazy now, imagine what it's going to be when Dylan Cease is the only major league starter on the White Sox team, because that is a scenario that is not implausible. Now, granted, we will have punted the season, so who cares? But still, who in the world is going to be run out for 2, 3, 4, and 5 starts? It's going to be very exciting, and I'm going to guess there may be, hey, Melissa, lucky for you, more cussing. We promise more cussing as soon as the Sox Pop Live number 4, which will be coming up at a predetermined time that might be announced somehow with more advance notice than maybe 20 minutes. But listen, we appreciate those of you who jumped right on with us, who apparently knew that this was going to happen. Good spidey sense there. Thank you for being there for us again. Hello, Japan. Hello, France. And all places. Oh, hello, SEC. Hello, Ole Miss. We love you. Whatever your favorite food is down there, Ole Miss, we love that food. It's our favorite. And we can't wait to get some of your players on the team right now. Guys we're talking to right now, in the system next year because you
There's-
know you're coming to Chicago. You
there's
almost
two-
have no choice.
There's 2 boxes of Project Birmingham merch on its way to Mississippi right now as we speak.
Just come up by the end of the season. Bow out of your senior year or your junior year. Just show up. Yeah, we'll take you.
just
Undrafted free agent.
Yeah, Birmingham's not
Yeah.
too far from where you are. Just come on over.
Yeah,
Like,
forego
maybe
that eligibility.
they might call Malachi up and see if he wants to get a quick Tommy John, get some rehab real quick on his shoulder, and see if he wants to grow.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Hey man,
Yeah, get
guys,
warming up,
good.
Malachi. He didn't show for our live broadcast, so maybe he is actually conducting a workout. He's still got his
Let me
gear.
call him. I will
so-
see if he's on his
He,
way.
he took a nap. He took a
Well,
nap
Cobb
and
County, I should say, because they are not in Atlanta.
no, he slept through the Sox game and the podcast. He took a nap.
All right.
Must be
Well,
nice.
okay. Well, then now he's rested up, and now he can get to.
He's
his
not.
workout.
He's
So,
not worried at all
Malachi-
about this draft. This draft was so good to him that
Oh,
he
yeah.
just slept.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you could see it in his face when Jacob Gonzalez was announced that he was overjoyed and he knew the White Sox were headed in the right direction and the next decade of his fandom would not be wasted. So we can all rest easy in that. And all of you out there, please rest easy that your fandom will be rewarded one day. It might be after your life ends, but hey, that's just the way fandom goes, right? Okay, well, on behalf of Sox Pop, Sox Populi, all the stuff that we do, and Dante Jones for hopping on. Thanks for hustling home and hopping on. Adrian Serrano, to you as well. Extra effort, double credit for you. And guys, really, get the shoulders loose because, I mean, we can talk about Malachi, but hey, if he's proven he's got a propensity for just, sleeping through some key assignments. So, Adrian, Dante, the opportunity is there. I think my time may have passed. You guys, all right, think about it.
Yeah, they might do a Bill Vick and decide to do a promotion for oldest rookie starter.
Hey, Kevin Hickey became a White Sox because he was a 16-inch softball player. So, and hey, he became a major leaguer and a beloved clubhouse figure. R.I.P. Hick. Okay, well, we will do one of these again one day. We'll try and give you more advance warning than 20 minutes, but if not, just keep it at the ready. In fact, maybe you should not change the channel from Sox Populi on YouTube, but there's nothing else to watch. On behalf of BB the Cat, Adrian Serrano, Dante Jones, myself, the sleepy Malachi Hayes, good vibes Jackie Kressel out there. She'll be with us again one day. Allie, hello to you too. Melissa Sage Mollenbach, probably just disgustedly driving home from Atlanta already. She is definitely making up all the cussing that we did not, aside from Dante, provide in this podcast. So cussing a blue streak, fueling her way home just based on that cussing. Shout out to Melissa. We'll be back again at some point, surely sooner than you are ready for us, but I promise it will be soon and it will be entertaining.